The quality of the vine was categorized into 3 grades: top, middle, and low. Each grade had a different price tag. Wu Lin was left in awe. He had finally found the missing piece he had been searching for. Its value was immeasurable to him. It held the key to unlocking the second seal. Although uncertain of the consequences, he knew he had to obtain it. Teacher Wu then asked about the auction date for the azure veined vine. He was informed that it would take place in 3 days. However, if he wanted a top-grade vine, the price would increase by approximately 20%. To determine the final price, they would need to consult with the auctioneer. Teacher Wu turned to Wu Lin for his opinion. Wu Lin felt that the 20% increase was quite steep, considering the estimated price of the vine was 5 million coins. With the increase, it would amount to 6 million coins. He advised Teacher Wu to wait for the auction. Teacher Wu agreed, and they made their way back home. Later that night, Wu Lin found himself wide awake, unable to sleep. His mind was consumed with thoughts of the upcoming Shrek Academy exam, which was just a week away. He devised a strategy. If he could acquire the azure veined vine within the next 3 days, he would have 4 precious days to prepare before the exam. Not only was his physical condition at its peak, but he also knew that opening the second seal would require some time. Determined, Wu Lin decided to spend the next 3 days practicing at the inn. After 3 days of intense preparation, Wu Lin and his teacher returned to the auction. The moment he had been eagerly waiting for had finally arrived, the auctioning of the azure veined vine. The bidding started at 3 million Federation coins, with each subsequent bid required to be at least 1,000 Federation coins higher. Wu Lin was filled with anticipation as he made his move, placing a bid of 3.1 million. However, he soon realized that he was not the only one interested in this rare item. The bidding quickly escalated, with others making increasingly higher bids. Wu Lin grew anxious as he noticed the price rising rapidly, fearing that it might exceed 5 million. Seeking guidance, he turned to Teacher Wu for advice. However, Teacher Wu left the decision in Wu Lin's hands, reminding him that ultimately it was his choice. Wu Lin regretted not purchasing it earlier, realizing the gravity of the situation. As the bidding continued, the price soared into the millions. Wu Lin felt beads of sweat forming on his forehead, shocked by the escalating bids. He knew that if this continued, he might not be able to afford it. Frustration and determination welled up within him, and he made up his mind. He had to secure the azure veined vine at any cost. Taking a deep breath, he placed a bid of 7.3 million. To his relief, no one could surpass his bid, and the azure veined vine was finally sold to him. Wu Lin couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had indeed spent a significant amount of money, but he knew it was a necessary investment in his future. Teacher Wu, recognizing the weight of the situation, instructed Wu Lin that it was time to leave the auction. Teacher Wu stated that he had 2 options. One could go back and improve the power of the bloodline immediately, but if it took too long, it would delay his exam. The second option was to take the exam directly without improving the power of the bloodline. Wu Lin had difficulties choosing and asked for Teacher Wu's advice. He inquired if he could get into Shrek Academy directly, but Teacher Wu found this hard to tell. According to Teacher Wu, Wu Lin had grown up. The money was his, and it was his business to decide. Wu Lin, upon further consideration, chose to increase his bloodline first. The 4 spirit treasures lay before him, ready for his use. He then began meditating. He began conversing with his guide, who referred to him as Old Tang, and inquired if he had found all the 4 spirit treasures. Wu Lin, with a smile etched upon his face, replied affirmatively. His guide then instructed him to get ready, for the absorption method of these 4 spiritual treasures would be different from the previous ones. The 1,000-year dragon scale fruit was to be taken directly, while the other 3 were to be combined, crushed, and turned into juice. The juice was to be poured into a cylinder of hot water, and Wu Lin was to soak in the hot water for meditation. After he prepared the water, he was to take the juice simultaneously. Both events were to happen at the same time. His guide then reminded him that he had to adjust his body for the best condition. Wu Lin, with a determined look on his face, replied that he had understood the terms and conditions. He then woke up, and he was ready to start. He informed Teacher Wu that he would take the dragon scale fruit directly, and as for the 3 spirit treasures, he requested that he help him make the juice and pour it into the hot water. He needed to meditate in that hot water to increase the power of his bloodline. Teacher Wu assisted him in preparing the hot water, and his teacher began the process of fusing the spirit treasures. Wu Lin's attention was drawn to the hot water as it transformed into a vibrant cayenne hue. The original 1,000-year land dragon tendon, which measured at least 5 meters, had undergone compression to achieve its current state. Normally, it would require 3 days and 3 nights of high-temperature steaming to soften it before adding the medicine. However, Wu Lin desired to turn it into juice, prompting Teacher Wu to employ unconventional methods using the Tangsek skill. Wu Lin marveled at his spirit power, observing how the land dragon tendon spun faster and faster, revealing its unexpected versatility. He also noticed the water's temperature rising and its color turning into a deep shade of green. After all the preparations were completed, it was finally time to start. Tuang Wulin kicked things off by grabbing the dragon scale fruit and immersing himself in the scalding hot water. The heat was unbearable. Teacher Wu advised him to return to the tub and use his strength to regulate the temperature. He was instructed to submerge his entire body in the water, while keeping only his head above the surface. However, the water was so hot that it was almost impossible to soak his entire body, making him feel like he was being cooked alive. He grimaced in pain, letting out sorrowful moans. Concerned, Teacher Wu wondered if he was okay and felt guilty about the situation. As his agony increased, Teacher Wu had to step in to assist him. Suddenly, he calmed down and shut his eyes. A golden aura enveloped his body, leaving Teacher Wu in awe of his powerful bloodline. His qi and bloodline were so robust that they emitted energy fluctuations. It was truly remarkable. The next day, Zhang Kong arranged a meeting with Shun Yi. Shun Yi informed him that the exam was scheduled for the following day and asked about his students' readiness. This was precisely why Zhang Kong had called the meeting. One of his students was in deep meditation, and he was unsure when he would awaken. He requested a postponement of the exam for a few days, but unfortunately, this was against the school's regulations. Shun Yi suggested letting the other students take the exam first, but Zhang Kong had no other options. Back at the inn, members of Class Zero's team disagreed with this plan. Z pointed out that Wu Lin had been eagerly anticipating the exam, and missing it would be a huge disappointment for him. Xiao Yan agreed. Gui Yue then approached Teacher Shen and offered to take Wu Lin's place in the exam. She was willing to sacrifice her chance to allow Wu Lin to participate. She believed in his abilities and was confident that if she could pass the exam, then Wu Lin could too. Shen Yi gently reminded her that Shrek Academy was her desired destination, but the exam was no laughing matter. With her exceptional qualifications, she had a good chance of being accepted. Shun Yi advised her to make a wise decision, but Gu Yue defiantly declared that if Wu Lin couldn't take the exam, then she wouldn't participate either. Shun Yi grew concerned and urged Zhang Kong not to hold up the other students because of one person, as they were all outstanding. Zhang Kong reassured everyone, instructing them to remain calm and not worry, as he would handle the situation. He told them to go back and rest. Z then questioned Xiao Yan, asking if Shrek Academy was more important than their captain. According to Z, their captain held greater importance, and if he couldn't take the exam, then he wouldn't either. Teacher Wu stood motionless, lost in contemplation. Suddenly, he turned to Shun Yi and requested her assistance in returning to the school. He understood what his students desired, and he couldn't trade his dignity for their future. He knew what he had to do. With Shun Yi by his side, he decided to go back to the school and apologize. Shrek Academy stood as the premier institution across the continent, attracting aspiring individuals from far and wide. With the establishment of the Spirit Pagoda, the visionary Huo Yuhao of the first generation proposed the school's expansion. This led to the rise of Shrek City as the largest city on the mainland with Shrek Academy at its heart. Aspiring spirit masters sought to enter the academy, but only a select few could pass the rigorous entrance exam. Every 3 years, Shrek Academy welcomed 200 new students, yet only 50 were deemed worthy of joining the inner courtyard. The Dean of Sky Sea Academy, Long Huan Tian, held these students in high regard, recognizing their exceptional talent. Graduates of Shrek Academy were considered the cream of the crop, sought after by prestigious organizations with exclusive agreements. The inner courtyard students were trained to become battle armor masters, with strict requirements for admission. Candidates had to be nominated by major cities, be under 25 years old, and possess a spirit power cultivation base of at least rank 35. The primary requirement was to possess the qualities of a monster. This rule was established 2 millennia ago when Shrek Academy was founded, making it clear that only monsters were welcome, not regular individuals. As Shun Yi and Wu neared the entrance of Shrek Academy, a strong sense of nostalgia filled the air, blending with the fading light of the evening sun. Wu's expression was a mix of emotions, his eyes fixed on the golden gates with a yearning that seemed to surpass time itself. With his hands deep in his pockets, he stood there, lost in thought. Watching his friend's silent contemplation, Shun Yi couldn't help but wonder about the memories flooding Wu's mind. What was going through his head as he stood there, his face illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun? Interrupting the solemn moment, Shun Yi gently nudged Wu, bringing him back to reality. It was time to enter. As they walked on, Shun Yi shared with him that the teacher had been constantly thinking about him. She expressed her joy that Wu was willing to accompany him back. Along the way, they encountered some guards, and Shun Yi introduced Wu as her friend. She then informed them about the access order she had obtained. Initially, the order was intended for her female disciple, But unexpectedly, Wu was now using it. Shun Yi continually kept a watchful eye on Wu from a distance, clearly concerned about him. Wu, on the other hand, found himself reminiscing about his past life. He used to be an optimistic and cheerful young boy, but now he had grown into a young man. Ever since the girl left, his smile had vanished, and he had secluded himself in a remote place in East Sea City for many years. He had never returned. At times, Shun Yi felt as if Wu Zhangkong's soul had disappeared, and the only reason he was still alive was because of the promise he had made to that girl. It was their names combined that formed the name of the battle armor. Finally, Wu had decided to take on students, and Shun Yi was genuinely happy for him. Besides that girl, there was now something else that held a special place in his heart. Suddenly, Wu halted and inquired about their teacher's whereabouts. Shun Yi informed him that the teacher was in the inner courtyard. The inner courtyard held great significance to Wu, and he had put in countless efforts for it, as well as because of it. Surprisingly, there were no guards stationed at the entrance of the inner courtyard. Shun Yi continued to address Wu as brother, which offended him. He made it clear that he was not her brother, and requested her to refrain from using that term, as their teacher would punish her if he heard. However, Shun Yi persisted in calling him brother and assured him that she would fetch the teacher. In response, Wu stopped in his tracks, lowered, and instructed Shun Yi to go ahead while he waited for her. Wu had returned after 13 long years. Back then, he was impulsive and proud, but now, after all this time, he had gained a deeper understanding. He pondered if there was a way to make amends for the past. Shun Yi appeared, addressing Wu as a senior brother. Curious, Wu asked about the teacher's words, only to be told that he was not welcome. Grateful for the information, Wu accepted it gracefully. The teacher had instructed Shun Yi to ensure Wu remained lowered, not allowing him to stand for even a moment. Yet in a sudden turn of events, the teacher's face lit up with joy, impossible to conceal. Shun Yi was certain that the teacher still cared deeply for Wu. She vowed to go and convince him, knowing he would ultimately forgive Wu. Wu was filled with gratitude. He understood he had no right to seek forgiveness from the teacher, but he had to do it for the sake of his students. They truly needed his guidance. Meanwhile, back at the motel, Z noticed the approaching dawn with no sign of Mr. Wu's return. Gu Yue advised him to wait a bit longer. Feeling hungry, Z asked Gu Yue and Xiaoyan to watch over the captain while he grabbed breakfast. Xiaoyan requested bread, jam, yogurt, and 2 fried eggs, while Gu Yue wanted meat, steamed buns, juice, yogurt, and some snacks. After Z left, someone entered the room, making Xiaoyan think it was Mr. Wu, but it turned out to be Miss Shen. She reassured them that Mr. Wu was safe and assisting with the postponed academy exam. Although the exam would be more challenging due to the delay, it also presented an opportunity for them. Once their captain woke up, the exam would take place. Xiaoyan was thrilled with this plan. Wu Lin continued his meditation in the bathtub, engaging in a conversation with his guide. Old Tang praised him for his progress and asked about his well-being, to which Wu Lin responded positively. The process of lifting the seal this time was not as painful as before, which his guide confirmed. Old Tang explained how Wu Lin's physical strength and spirit power had significantly improved over the years, especially after compressing his spirit power. Wu Lin's cultivation methods focused on strengthening his body and enhancing the endurance of his meridians. Anticipation grew as his guide hinted at a surprise after lifting the second seal. Although there was indeed a surprise, Old Tang advised Wu Lin to focus on the challenges that would come with lifting the third seal. Wu Lin dismissed the idea, confident that he had plenty of time to prepare before reaching 20 years old. He made a mistake because, in reality, the third seal needed to be lifted before Wu Lin reached the age of 16. This meant he had only 3 years to get ready. Wu Lin then inquired if this meant the time between each seal being released would become shorter. His guide confirmed this, explaining that the interval would decrease with each release. Wu Lin then asked how short the interval would be between lifting 2 seals in the future. His guide revealed that it would be reduced by 3 months each time a seal was lifted. Once all 9 seals were lifted, 1 seal would need to be released every year. Old Tang promised to inform him of the spirit treasure requirements for the next seal lifting, and advised him to focus on increasing his cultivation and physical strength in the next 3 years to make lifting the seal easier. If he weren't adequately prepared, he would face a challenge. With that, Old Tang departed, leaving Wu Lin with lingering questions. Wu Lin awoke, his mind filled with uncertainty. He examined his body, searching for any signs of abnormality, but found none. However, hunger gnawed at his stomach, reminding him of his physical needs. As he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, a sense of pride washed over him. He had successfully lifted the second seal, a feat he had been striving for. Yet he knew he had to push himself even harder in the future. The question lingered in his mind. Were his friends and teammates still waiting for him? Opening the door, he was greeted with a heartwarming sight. All his friends and team members had gathered in the living room, patiently awaiting his awakening. The joy in their eyes mirrored his elation. They were genuinely happy that he had finally regained consciousness. However, Wulin's mind was preoccupied with the upcoming exam. He wondered if there was still enough time to take it. Z shattered his hopes with a disheartening revelation. They were already too late.